The Browns offseason program has started. So there's a lot going on at the Browns facility. Players are here, starting up on that. We got press conferences. Unfortunately, all of that has to be sort of put to the side because it wouldn't be a Browns offseason or something stupid without assault, or at least alleged assault. Perry and Winfrey was arrested in Harris County, Texas, because of course it is the same, one of the two counties that Deshaun Watson was indicted or was put in front of a grand jury or whatever his case was and then denied, but charged by a woman who said, with witnesses, from what I understand, really grabbed her arm and pulled on her in a dispute over a rental car or a dog or some just stupid. And this is unfortunately not unexpected from Perry and Winfrey, who's had a less than stellar start with the Browns in his first full year, has had a number of issues that just suggest he's an unserious human being in a professional environment and professional sport. And that's going to alter what the Browns do, although they may have already come to this conclusion on their own. I frankly would have if it were me. That you can't count on him, which is sort of a big deal in this environment. And the Browns are good enough now that they don't have to rely on idiots, or so we should hope. Bree, obviously this is a situation that you and I are aligned on in this type of situation. We don't want to deal with it in any form. And I imagine your instinct is sort of like mine, which is let's go ahead and get rid of him now and move on. But at least for the moment, he's still here.
Yeah. So this broke last week, of course, after we recorded our podcast. And to be honest, when I heard the player that was attached to this, I wasn't that surprised, which is terrible to say, only because I felt like he was a little bit of a loose cannon in a sense of there were some off the field things happening last year that we weren't really privy to all of the details of. And I just felt like, to your point, he's been unreliable. He's been disciplined for reasons, again, that we don't really know of last year. To be frank, he's not good enough to act this way. And that sounds really terrible to say out loud, but
100% true.
Unfortunately, the precedent that has been set is that if you are a really good player in this league, there will always be a place on an NFL roster for you. That obviously happened on the team that we root for with the Cleveland Browns. They paid guaranteed money for this man that they have at quarterback that obviously had no, I guess, formal legal actions against him, but there were a ton of lawsuits, and there are a couple that are still out there that he still has to deal with. But this is situations and instances like this are tough to, in my opinion, talk about and address, because as a team, you've almost kind of laid your cards out there of, hey, like, do we just turn a blind eye depending on who the player is and how good you are? Is that really how we're going to go about this, Pete? Like, I'm just very confused.
It puts you in a situation where you're picking and choosing your battles,
right?
And on things that shouldn't need to be, decided upon. But that's ultimately the realm they've delved into by making the decision they did with Deshaun Watson. But to your point, it's 100% right on. If Perry and Winfrey was good, and obviously he was only a rookie last year, there would probably be more inclination to be willing to look past it. Now, they may keep him for a while. Right now, they can sort of hide under the due process, which isn't unfair, but it also gives you a little leeway in which to operate. But
that's also what I find challenging in this business. Unfortunately, the NFL, and I know it's not the only sport where there are issues like this that arise, but it's almost as if the NFL or the teams are left to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner when they shouldn't have to be. Like, that's why there is a specific legal process that goes on. And, I can understand them not addressing it at this point in time because some of those things need to happen. And that's where, the team could argue, or I could argue against myself and say that these things will be handled appropriately in the setting that they need to be handled in, and we're not going to make any decisions as a team. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that's how they approach the situation.
Yeah, right now, if you're looking at sort of the big leagues, I think Major League Baseball is sort of the most progressive in terms of really laying, putting the hammer down on some of these situations. NBA is dealing with this right now, obviously with Ja Morant, to some extent, different circumstances, but nevertheless. But anyway, as for Winfrey, some of the stuff we've heard about, teammates were wanting to get involved and get the team to sort of lay down the law with him. He was late to a lot of practices, and that got him suspended at one point. And then he ultimately concussed himself on a scooter.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, he's just
funny.
A 300-pound man on a scooter. So, and then he has an interview, he does something with Mary Kay and goes, yeah, I've really learned from this and that and everything else, and it's going to be better. He just strikes me as a person who struggles with impulse control. But
yeah. Fair.
So, and I think if you're the Browns, you looked at last season, I can't imagine you're sitting there going, oh, yeah, he's going to grow up and he'll figure it out. I think before this ever happened, this latest incident, whether it's true or not, I think the Browns had to go into this going, we've got to come up with at least one, if not multiple backup plans for this. They've done that in some regards. They've signed Tristan Hill. They've signed Maurice Hurst. These are sort of scratch offs to me. They re-signed Ben Stilley, who is an exclusive rights free agent defensive tackle, but they still don't have a starting defensive tackle at that spot. So Perry and Winfrey is sort of irrelevant to that conversation. They still need to deal with that. But what this does now is it sort of puts a little more pressure on the Browns to find another guy beyond that and make it so that if you're not just outright cutting Winfrey, you have to put enough in front of him that if he gets through all these things, he's a damn good football player. Because if he's not, then you move on and you don't have to deal with it anymore. But that's unfortunately where we're at with him. Meanwhile, the stuff that isn't as the stuff that was a little bit more positive was sort of the energy in the building with everything that's going on today. A lot of guys feeling better regards injury. Amari Cooper is 8 weeks removed from getting surgery to deal with his groin or whatever, a core muscle. So he's on the right track. We found out that Myles Garrett shoulder is largely fine. He's still dealing with the dislocated big toe a little bit, but he seems to think he will be fine. At which point he declared war on obstacle courses and called it I believe his was getting chased by the police course. But yeah, he's done. He says he's retired from hoops and obstacle courses and said he doesn't know of a player who didn't hate doing that thing. So that part was interesting. And then the last one, JOK, he did not have a presser, but was updated that he did not have to have surgery on the foot that ended his season. He is still rehabbing. That's good news, particularly with that area of the body. I mean, it's always a win if you don't have to have surgery. Just when it comes to injuries, the less you have to be cut on, the better. So that is good news from that standpoint. But Myles Garrett, nobody talked really about the scheme because it's April 18th. There's not really much to talk about. So mostly it was injury updates and then just how they feel and talking about some of the players, which was interesting. I don't, what of anything stood out to you? I mean, I think what jumped out is Myles Garrett and some of these guys were more interested in talking about the Cavs-Knicks series than necessarily what's going on in Cleveland. And it sounds like they're going to have a lot of players in attendance for game 2 at least.
I kind of loved that aspect of it because, in my opinion, that's where the focus should be in Cleveland right now. And it's so easy to get caught up in, obviously, the town being very football dominant. And right now, their fellow neighbors, the Cavaliers, are playing a really pivotal game 2 at home. So I love that they were kind of pushing that attention back to their friends and their fellow professional athletes that are up to a pretty big task. I think in all honesty, it's always really tough to get anything out of these press conferences at this time of year. It's nice to see the players back in the building, to see all of their pictures, the smiling faces. They put a new TikTok out yesterday of all the players entering the building and
Mm-hmm.
giving heart signals to the social media manager. I love the lighthearted fun of this. But what stood out to me, at least high level, was just both Myles Garrett, Greg Newsome speaking to the media today. Just, I don't want to say gushing. Gushing's not the right word. I don't know what the right word is, but they were talking a lot about how excited they were to work with Schwartz. And
but we'll get to him. But you know who gushed over Jim Schwartz? One Kevin
Deshaun.
Stefanski.
Oh, Kev, I was looking at, well, I know they both were
he may
kind
have
of
replaced David Bell for his man crush on this team right now. He loves him some Jim Schwartz. But anyway,
well, I
go
felt
ahead.
like it was telling too with Deshaun Watson even saying, and I don't know if he like meant this as like a jab to last year's defense or what's this? I've already forgotten. I've moved on.
Who's that? Oh, Joe Woods.
Joe Woods. Almost went back to Steve Wilkes. That was so many years ago. I just completely blacked out. Deshaun was even talking about like, I'm really excited to see the defense and the different parts and pieces, and then having Schwartz at the helm, like a guy that has Super Bowl experience, like that's going to be really good for us as an offense to be able to compete against that type of talent, almost alluding as though it wasn't good enough last year, which we could all agree it wasn't. I know Greg Newsome did a pretty big heel turn that we're going to get into.
It's a big day for Greg Newsome, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that. And then Myles, obviously, just talking about the one comment that he made that stood out was just about putting in the extra work, staying later, staying after, meeting with the guys and getting 1% better. I know that obviously it's all talk right now. We will see if that happens. We will see if that ends up paying off. But there was a lot of questions last year about, or call outs from the media, the fans, about Myles being a leader. If Myles is going to step up and continue to be a leader, this is exactly what you would want to hear from him. This is exactly what you want to see from him, being demanding of his teammates, really stepping into that role, having a new coaching staff at the helm. Like, I don't know. Again, it's all words right now. Doesn't mean much at this point. But what they are saying, I like.
I mean, you're right. I mean, ultimately it is words, but I think with Myles Garrett in particular, it reflects the change that they've made on the roster. And Perry and Winfrey is emblematic of what last year was, I think, for Myles Garrett, dealing with children.
Yeah.
And I've always gotten the impression that Myles Garrett really loves working with guys who want to be good. He does not deal well with guys who are just along for the ride or aren't really in it for the same reasons he is. I think he holds himself to a high standard. I've always thought he holds teammates to a high standard in that regard. And I think that is part of this, talking up guys like Dalvin Tomlinson and Okoronkwo and some of the guys, and Jim Schwartz is part of that. I thought it was the nugget that I thought was interesting is, and he threw Jordan Elliott's name out there, which, because if you're heading into this year, you're sort of looking at Jordan Elliott and maybe on the outside looking in. I should put it this way. I'm not counting on Jordan Elliott. If Jordan Elliott does really well, great, because he was extremely highly regarded coming out of Missouri, a ton of talent. Like Pro Football Focus had him in like the 20s of their draft rankings that year. And it just hasn't worked, but it's a position that takes a lot of time to develop. And he admitted that the first 2 years he didn't work very hard. Well, last year he was better, but it wasn't great on the field. Is this where it kicks in? And now with Winfrey's situation, does that give him another little pathway, a little light that gives him a shot? Maybe. It was just interesting that he threw that out there in the same line as Tomlinson. But I do think that is just, I think that's such a big element for him. Is I think it's more serious for Myles Garrett because he feels like he's surrounded by serious people. And obviously the car wreck was huge. You know, we're past that. It's that part, that is part of it. So I think there's an enthusiasm there, but you're right. He's got to step it up. And I think it was interesting when Cam Justice asked him if he thought he had should have a bigger role. And he's like, no, I'm the same guy. I'm going to do the same things, which is fine because they seem to have a locker room that doesn't need as much. You know, it's interesting that, you know, obviously they're not going to talk about Joe Woods in this because everything's about Jim Schwartz, but Anthony Walker not long ago on 92.3 did an interview and he's like, no, we failed Joe Woods. And he's like, I failed Joe Woods. Nevertheless, I think they are looking at this as a big positive, as an opportunity to sort of redeem themselves on a lot of fronts. So I like what I heard from that. To me, Greg Newsome is his own thing because of all the things. Greg Newsome, like, I don't know if critical is the word, but just pointed out some things in terms of maybe being a little immature, maybe being a little too online for his own sake. But at the same time, he's very smart. There's no questioning that. He went to Northwestern and just is a bright, bright guy. Whether it's what he heard from Jim Schwartz, which sounds like it was a big part for him, or just sort of seeing what was out, figuring out where his situation is, and probably being told, if he asked for a trade, and he says he didn't, I'll take his word for it. But if he did, told flat out no, that he's got to figure it out. And I love the attitude he had for this. And part of that was talking about being open to playing in the slot. He felt like he was put in a situation where he was playing linebacker at times last year. Not unfair. There are slot corners who can do that. Not really his thing, and I'm not suggesting he needs to, but his competitiveness came out. It was interesting that he said he was angry about the report that he wanted to be traded. I'm sure part of him is a little upset. I do think a little bit of that is sort of playing it up because he wants to sort of release a message, which to me, I think is really smart on his part and sort of selling himself to Cleveland. He just is very, in his words, very committed to being here, loves what's being built and all these other things. So I think if he's trying to send a message, I think he crushed it. We've got to see what happens, but I think what happened today for Greg Newsome is a bigger deal than people will probably realize.
Yeah, there's probably a little bit of that too, where there's some saving face and being in the good graces of everyone again. Listen, he's probably had those conversations already with his teammates, with the staff, with everybody internally that we're obviously, again, not privy to that information or necessarily all of what went down. But again, really being out there and speaking to the media for the first time since some of those things, and not doing it on social media because he obviously came to his own defense immediately that same day. And we obviously called him out for that. But yeah, he came off really passionate, really wanting to reassure that this is the team that he wants to play for, that he had time to sit down with Jim Schwartz and really think about the scheme and what his role would be within the scheme. And it sounded like he was pretty happy with how they would be utilizing him, and having an open mind of where he would play. And I can understand his frustration. If he felt like he was put into a situation that wasn't his strong suit. And then again, obviously that directly impacts his own personal career and his potential future contracts. I can understand the frustration there. I think there's different ways to go about it, but some of that kind of came to light, I guess, for me in listening to him talk. But he also alluded to, the difference in hopefully how the defensive line will be more of a factor this year and making their job, I don't want to say easier, but maybe making their job. The backfield is really talented. The corners are really talented. We have a talented group of cornerbacks that I think can make some plays. And I felt like all of last year, or for the most of last year, they weren't really put into positions to succeed. It felt like so much was reliant on our cornerbacks, and the defensive line, we know, they weren't good enough. It was Myles Garrett. Let's be real. And Jadeveon Clowney, give or take a few games. But so I'm excited to kind of see this come together. And it felt like he also had some clarity as to, okay, well, it's not going to be this feast or famine where, there's going to be different schemes for the defensive line. And that's going to make our jobs easier, if you will, or be able to make more impactful plays.
Sure. No, easier. I would go with easier. I mean, there's no question that quarterback who has less time or feels more stress is more likely to make bad decisions or have to throw the ball earlier.
I just felt like our cornerbacks sometimes were just left to hang out to dry. And
that's 100% fair.
We get so, we as fans get so mad, Denzel Ward, we wanted his head on a stick sometimes, or even him having to make some tackles where he injures himself. And they were just put into positions last year that I just didn't think were beneficial.
Well, I mean, because your defensive line was so bad, linebackers were getting whacked by linemen. So
Yeah, dude.
safeties were having to come up and make tackles.
Yeah.
Because safeties were having to come up and make tackles, they're not as back as far and not prepared to sort of cover over the top. So now corners are having to do more and more of the work. So that's where one thing leads to another thing leads to another thing.
Blech.
Yeah,
I
and
don't
it's
like
just
it.
it's bad. So it's 100% true. And it now it gives the Browns a little more flexibility in the draft. This draft is loaded at corner. The Browns should take a corner. I personally still think they should get somebody with inside outside versatility, but they may not feel like they have to necessarily go get a guy who plays specifically the slot. That's how much this changes the situation with Greg Newsome. But don't keep drafting corners. If the one thing the Browns are good at is picking corners, so keep doing it. So that is why I think that becomes a very big deal. The guy who made, I think, the least amount of waves, and I think some of this is deliberate and some of this is just sort of who he is Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson isn't necessarily a verbose and loud and, put all the attention on me guy anyway, but he's certainly incentivized right now to do that even less. So it was interesting. It seemed like he was highlighting everybody else in the organization. Really excited about the weapons. Really excited that Amari Cooper's healthy. Really excited that they've got Elijah Moore and they've got more just offensive help across the board. Jordan Akins is a guy he played with in Houston. He's excited to have this guy. And then he was pumped that Josh Dobbs is back and that he really likes Alex Van Pelt as his quarterback's coach and all these other things that feel like put him in a position to sort of be the best player he can be. And then, he did address questions about criticism, and Bree's name may or may not have come up from Mary Kay Cabot. I'm not sure. She, asked if, the possibility about being broken, may not have used those words specifically. If he's sort of worried about naysayers who say he can't be that good. And, what else is he going to say? He's
yes,
not.
I am very worried. Can you imagine if he was like, yep, I'm a little bit scared.
That would be good. That would be good content. He's not Baker Mayfield. He's not going to be the guy who's going to go and
yes, but I'm terrified.
People.
I'm terrified that's what we're going to get.
No. I mean, in terms of taking on media people who say,
oh, yeah, head on.
He's not going to at you and go, you think I'm broken? We'll see about that.
He's definitely not going to do that now with all the criticism
right.
is already out there.
That's, that's the difference. He's trying to, I have no doubt this all fuels him and he's, using it for motivation and everything, all the other cliches you can throw together with that. But he's really putting it in terms of, I'm going to have to go out and prove it, which is the right mindset to have, but it doesn't produce necessarily the greatest sound bites in the world for Bortez, which is also part of it. It's not like he's short or that he's not answering questions. He's just saying things that tend to be not jump off the page in terms of being volatile or anything like that.
Yeah, which I guess we could expect, playing it safer. But also he was confident in himself, although I wouldn't expect him to say I'm going to be terrible and things just weren't meshing and I don't know if I'll ever get back into it again. That's not going to happen.
That would be a choice.
It would have been really funny though, if that's how he would have led with all of this. Yeah, I felt like he made it more about his team and the additions, and he touched on the defense and Jim Schwartz coming in to be the coordinator this year and being excited about that. I mean, obviously it was a lot of excitement. And then I thought it was interesting. Who asked him about the Lamar Jackson? Was it Mary Kay again?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
She asked about Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts.
Yes.
I know Jalen Hurts was brought up. I think she was the one who brought up both of them.
Yeah.
Could be wrong about that.
Which I had to laugh because he talked about Lamar obviously should get what he deserves. And
everything.
He's a great, he should get everything. He's a great player, and love watching him play. And then I felt like he almost forgot that he's in the same division and was except when we play them. And I'm like, I don't think you want to be rooting for him or the Ravens really at all in any of this. But I actually thought he was going to give something away or like there'd be more to it. But yeah, he obviously didn't allude to giving him any type of advice or whatever. But in my opinion, he should totally sabotage the Ravens and definitely be like, yeah, Lamar, like definitely hold out, like do not sign with the Ravens. Like that's what he should have said.
That would have been entertaining
Right?
for him
Come
to just
on.
really embrace being a heel at this point
Exactly.
and just disrupt
Just
everything.
like own it.
Yeah.
Just own it.
The one thing that I thought was sort of interesting about what Deshaun said was like, everybody wants to know what the offense is going to be. Even though we can basically already tell you what the offense is going to be, we pretty much know what's going to change. There's going to be more receivers on the field and they're going to throw a little bit more, but they're still going to run the ball. Kevin Stefanski's not going to, who has been a phenomenal running coach, is not going to wake up and go, we're done with that. But when he was asked about it, he was like, I don't know how much different it's going to be. And if I say it's going to be different and it doesn't work, then we're going to look stupid or whatever, something along those lines of, we're just going to figure out how this thing's going to work. He doesn't want to say something on April 18th and then be held to it during the season because the offense could change or whatever. So those type of answers were interesting. But there was not much to really get at this point in terms of that, because a lot of it's going to figure itself out on the field, what works, what doesn't. Kevin Stefanski, his presser was interesting. He led with Chris Smith, which is really, really sad situation. We don't have any details on why he passed away, but he's 31. And what makes it really heartbreaking for his situation is when he was with the Browns, he lost his girlfriend and or wife, if you recall, on the side of the road, got hit by a car. And I believe at the time there was like a 2-year-old child. So like Chris Smith was like obviously devastated by this, and it took a major hit for him. But I mean, if his little girl, their little girl, is all of a sudden without both parents in a very short order. So that was very heartbreaking to hear all that drop last night. And it's been, Chris Smith is not somebody who's had like a huge career, but 3 different teams made it a point to, come out with stuff. NFL Films came out with something like talking about him as a player you've heard, or more of a person than necessarily a player. And you've heard all kinds of outpouring from different teammates. Myles Garrett's part of his presser was very sweet in terms of talking about the things he did. But like, Chris Smith was on the team in like 2018, 2019. Kevin Stefanski wasn't here, but like, because of the nature of the NFL, you got stuff from Baker Mayfield, who's with Tampa, Tavier Thomas, who's with the Houston Texans, like all these people from all over the league now who are sort of impacted by this guy. So that part of it was nice, even though obviously the situation is just awful. But getting into the presser thing, Kevin Stefanski doesn't comment on ongoing legal situations or stuff like this. But I did feel like it was interesting that Kevin Stefanski, when asked specific questions, generalized it to a point where he's almost like mentally moved on. And he may not have, that may just be how he's going to operate. But that was just sort of what my impression of him, that is like, we're moving on. We're not wasting our time with this, and we're on to the next one.
Yeah, that was my impression too. With him, I thought his press conference was interesting. I feel like Kevin is he's even keeled, doesn't really give much away. And I didn't think that was really any different, but I did feel like there were a lot of pauses in some of the questions that he was asked, and maybe some more stumbling over some answers than per usual. Not that he like wasn't prepared, but kind of felt like there were some instances where he was almost talking in circles a little bit. And I feel like it was in regards to the Perion Winfrey thing, where, like, again, like that's an interesting situation, because he's like, yeah, we address it. We address it with the entire team. We will talk about it. We'll talk about it when we leave from this mini camp. We'll talk about it again. When we come back, we'll talk about it again when they leave for their respite before they come back. I'm just like, I don't know. I felt like he was a little bit kind of tripped up when it came to that.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where they want to be smart, tough, and accountable. And every time, at least in this last sort of this like 18-month period or 2 years of dating back to acquiring Deshaun Watson and doing all these things, that like they've put themselves in a position to be criticized on that front often. And this is just the latest example. And I have to think from Kevin Stefanski's point of view, he's like, we should be done with this and we're moving on. And, this player is not allowing us to do that. And, this isn't really what I want to talk about. So I agree with you. I think impatient would be a word I would describe, not with necessarily the questions, but just the fact that we're still doing this has to be frustrating for him. So yeah, I agree with you. It was, and some of the pauses and stuff, he was like doing stuff. So like,
did he knock on wood? Is that what he did for one of the? Okay,
he did. Tony Grossi, who it's always an event when Tony asks him a question because he won't say it, but he's certainly got a specific relationship when it comes to Tony Grossi. But like asking about, being a more normal off season and everything else, and his reaction was knocking on wood. But look, I mean, in some ways, he's always sort of searching for the right words for the question. And obviously, the more delicate the question, the more careful he's got to be. But yeah, it's no one wants to be in that situation, and it sucks if you're that guy. But ultimately, he's got to be the one to do it. But I think the other part of that impatience thing is that he had to do that for Deshaun Watson forever. Like last year, almost every press conference in some form or another, he had to be sort of deflecting or trying to move on or trying to give as much as he could. So yes, I think there's a fatigue at this point with that. With him, he was asked about the offensive stuff, and he's in the same boat. He's sort of non-committal on specifics other than trying to put guys in the best position to succeed. But as I mentioned earlier, gushed about Jim Schwartz, gushed in terms of like him talking about Jim Schwartz, how excited he was when Jim Schwartz led the meeting and was previewing the defense and stuff like that. It was like, it was adorable listening to him. He really, really, really likes having, and you've talked about this endlessly, that he really likes having two former head coaches because who did he mention alongside having Jim Schwartz on one side of his office, Bill Callahan on the other side, like the former head coaches with a ton of experience and how much he really values that. And I feel like he's very confident in the staff he's put together this year. Obviously he needs to be given what's on the line, but for all the things where, he doesn't want to really answer these type of questions. He loves answering and talking about Jim Schwartz.
Yes, I'm all here. I'm here for this. Like, are we going to call it a bromance? Maybe. Should we call it that?
Sure.
Pete wants nothing to do with this.
I mean, look.
Hey, I never heard him gush over Joe Woods.
No. Last year it was all David Bell. David Bell was his guy. So I don't know if he's done with David Bell at this point, or I assume he still likes him, but Jim Schwartz is his guy right now. But yeah, it's, you chalk it up. It's what he's been waiting for. This is all he's been waiting for as a head coach, and now he's getting to start doing it. And Jim Schwartz is a big part of what he wants to do. So that stuff is great. There's expectations. I mean, Deshaun Watson said himself, we need to rack up a ton of W's this year and get Cleveland excited, all this. And they're putting that as their expectation, win a lot of games, because like Mary Kay asked, these are the things that just entertain me to no end, because Kevin Stefanski's very good at these questions in a Belichickian sort of way. When she's like, so your expectations of the playoffs, he's like, well, all 32 teams are coming in talking about how they want to make the playoffs,
Super Bowl.
Or the Super Bowl. Yeah. So yeah,
it should be your goal. If it's not your goal at this point in time, you probably need to reevaluate things.
Sure. So look, it's not lost on anyone in that building what is expected. It was nice to hear Deshaun Watson talk about that. Some of the other players sort of hinted at that. Myles Garrett, that they are in a better spot. And with that comes all the expectations and the excitement.
I am equally as excited. Can you tell? I'm so excited.
Well, as always, there's always that self check you have.
I know. I'm still doing it. I'm still doing it. I thought I'd really be pulled back in yesterday because, the off-season workout starts and it's like all the social media accounts post like all the pictures of like the players coming back and entering the building. And I feel like always at this time, it's like snowing whenever they come back for their off-season workout, right? In April. I feel like last year.
It was really cold last year. Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, I'm like, it's such like a bad mojo in my opinion, because you've got some new players too who are newer to the area that are like, oh gosh, like why did I sign up for this when it's like snowing in April and May?
Yeah.
At this point in time.
David Njoku talked about it going from 77 to 33 in like a day.
And then back to 80 on Thursday.
So yeah. It's interesting. Did you see the numbers that came out for some of these guys? The new additions.
Oh, I saw Juan is Juan.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Juan Thornhill is going with number 1, which is the first player, I believe, since Michael Jackson in 1982.
Oh, man. What a throwback. What are some of the others?
Well, let's start judging. How do we feel about 1 on a safety?
I guess okay.
Here's my takeaway on Juan Thornhill. In the same way that John Johnson really wanted to be that dude, that leader in there.
Yeah.
Juan Thornhill has really jumped on this and really jumped on it in social media. Like he's not only is he like when the Greg Newsom thing came out, he was like, he played dad there. He's like, I'm not letting any of these guys go anywhere. But like Jack Duffin, he is like, Juan Thornhill has on 2 occasions tried to sort of mention to former teammates and the Chiefs, first with McCole Hardman and now most recently with Jerick McKinnon, about how they should come to Cleveland. Obviously, Hardman is with the Jets, and the Browns got Elijah Moore, but Jerick McKinnon's a running back. I actually talked to him at the Senior Bowl. He's a really bright kid, former quarterback. As a possible running back to come into Cleveland, to which Jack Duffin responds with a list of players he needs to go recruit. Juan Thornhill comes back, he's like on it. So he's taken this like persona of being this guy, which is interesting. Because obviously I really liked him coming out of college. I don't know what he was like relative to the Chiefs. So this is all new to me. Maybe this is how he's always been, but it really feels like he wants to be that presence. So I like it from that standpoint of trying to own it. He's putting the target on his back. All right. Dalvin Tomlinson sticking with 94. That's what he's been with both the Giants and the Minnesota Vikings. Abanya Okoronkwo, 54.
I'm impartial.
It's a poor choice. I think he should go back to the drawing board. Now, I give him credit. He tried. He wanted to be 7 so he could be, 007 and be 007.
Oh, 007. I love that.
Yes, but he's not allowed to. Now, he's 45 with Houston, and I assume he just flipped those. But get a number in the 90s. I think he would look great in a number of 90s. I think you need to have 2 digits that add up to more than 10 if you want to have more than 10 sacks. And right now he's at 9.
Okay.
So I'm concerned.
All right. That's the reasoning.
54 on an edge rusher.
9.
I don't know how I feel about that. Right now, Marquise Goodwin, who we did locate 3 weeks later.
Yes.
Where in the world is Marquise Goodwin? Apparently in the Browns facility now. 19. He has had a lot of numbers in his time in his career, and all of them are currently occupied by other players.
Oh.
So he's 19. So the bringing back the mantle that was Frisman Jackson at receiver. I'm good with it. It wouldn't surprise me if he ultimately changes it. If certain players get moved, he may switch numbers. But 19's fine. He's fast. We'll live with that.
Fine. That was Bernie Kosar, right? 19?
It was, until Frisman Jackson sort of, moved him out of the lexicon. But yeah, Jordan Akins is 84. He was 88 his entire time with Houston.
Oh, Harrison
Bryant is currently 88. So yeah, that sort of so he may be one that changes at some point, but it's fine for a tight end. Josh Dobbs is 15 again. He's another one who's had a million different numbers. I kind of, obviously Juan Thornhill has it, but I kind of wish he would go to number 1 like he had in Jacksonville for a minute. But we've sort of grown accustomed to him as 15. He looks good. Matthew Adams is a special teamer and linebacker who, as you informed me, was arrested for
Oh yeah,
like
I forgot.
had like it was either armor piercing or some kind of
Yeah.
bullets and handgun while he's a member of the I think with the Colts or the Bears. Not a great look.
Jeez, oh
He's
man.
40, which also doesn't give me a lot of confidence. I feel like if you're a linebacker,
Is it like 4+0s like the tackles like that they average per game? But like do you need like a stipulation of like it needs to add up to what as a linebacker?
40 in football is just not a number that the 40s don't really correspond well to anything other than like fullback.
I love this. I've never thought that much about numbers outside of like the numbers that I wore playing, but I know football, it's like very particular based on your position.
Well, it's just because it used to have so many rules to it that you always had
you had to like stick within these parameters. Wait, so can I like what number should Maddox be in flag football?
Well, what does he play? And what numbers do they have in flag football?
Actually, that's a good question. They might not have numbers. Wait, I didn't even tell you this piece. His team is the Steelers.
Oof. It's going to be tough for you.
Tough.
But it's all right. It's because the NFL is so specific in the rules. Other than, being skill players versus linemen, they give you a lot of freedom. So you can be a single-digit linebacker or pass rusher, all these things, which knowing what I do of the young man and his aggressiveness, I'm feeling that's where he's going to be at, that he could do well at that. And I'm wondering if that's one of those things where, they just give you, like they print out basically up to 21, 1 through 21 to go, here you go.
Yeah.
Or if they're a little bit more wide ranging with this. Mike Ford, the other special teams guy, corner, he's 27, which is fine. Tristan Hill.
Oh, 27. That's impactful. No Kareem Hunt.
That's true. That is true. Kareem Hunt's old number. Tristan Hill, 98. Defensive tackle, Maurice Hurst, 90. Because he's not getting his original number, which he broke into with the Las Vegas Raiders. And I think he wore at Michigan, which is 73. And then Wes Martin, the local boy who signed with the Browns, offensive lineman, is 67. So, yeah, numbers matter in the game of football. What were your what's your number that this would you rock? What you even now, what do you sort of identify with as your number?
Yeah, it's so weird how it just like sticks with you. So it differed. In basketball, I was 21. And then in softball, I was 7 because I loved Kenny Lofton. So like I picked number 7 like very early on, like second grade. And then that stuck with me throughout softball. And then I don't know why, like I got to 21 in basketball. I don't know. Huh. And now that I have kids and I pick their numbers, because like we get their jerseys and stuff, it's like, what number do you want? I'm like, well, it's 21 and 7. Duh. Like my husband's numbers like are not a factor in any of these equations, which I think he's offended by.
They'll figure it out. But yeah, particularly with certain positions, it's just gotta look right. So
yeah, I understand. 21, I feel like is a good number.
Well, I mean, right now you've got Denzel Ward wearing that.
Yeah, 21. Mm-hmm.
That's what Juan Thornhill was in college. That's I think the reason he got to 1 was he was 21 in college and he was 22 with the Chiefs, and has basically just said, "Screw it, I'm going to take 1 since both of those are occupied."
I'm like now. This is me like now Googling like who wore number 21 in basketball back in the day, like in
Dominique
the 90s.
Wilkins.
Okay, because I loved Anthony Hardaway. That's who I loved growing up.
Wasn't he just 1?
I think he was. I also loved Muggsy Bogues because he was short, and I identify. Yeah, he was number 1. Anthony Hardaway. I'm gonna have to like go back deep into the chest to figure out why I did that. I'll get back to you.
Maybe I love Dominique Wilkins. He was great at 21 for the Hawks. So yeah, the Browns offseason program has started. That's good. We're a week, 9 days from the NFL draft. The Browns 10 days from the NFL draft. As they sit there with their picks in the 3rd round. And it's nice the way the NFL schedule works that you get to a point where there's always something going on. And obviously the offseason program is different. There's only so much they can do. and certainly only so much we can see, but nevertheless, it feels like football things are happening, which is always a good thing. And so that's the next step in the progression. Draft comes, and then not too long after that, we get into some mini camp stuff. So getting closer. Anyway, do all the things, like, subscribe, tell your friends, get us on YouTube, all that good stuff. And we'll be back next week, although Bree will not be next week. We'll have our Browns Digest draft roundtable, and then we will break it all down when we get through it.